And that was 4 years ago now?
4 years ago.
Soup? Soup? Seriously? Soup.
Yeah, so we've had Tortured Poet's Apartment for like over 2 weeks at this point. A fortnight, if you will. And what are your thoughts on the album?
It was definitely a lot different than I expected it to be.
Okay, I also we stayed up together to listen to
did.
it when it came out, and Chris was taking notes the whole time, and every song she was like, would not listen again. Like in her notes, it was just like, would not listen.
I was probably a little harsh on the first. I should know better that it typically takes. I think it's rare for me to hear something on the first pass and really just love it right from the get. So I may have been a little hasty with some of my would nots, but I will say the songs get stuck in my head, but I probably got 4 or 5 deep into the second album. And
because it's a surprise second album.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So I stayed the night here at your house the night it came out, and we got done listening to the stuff that dropped at quote unquote midnight. I think it was 11 here, but the first part of the album, and then I get a text from you like an
2
hour.
a.m.
Yeah, an hour after everything had kind of settled down and you went to bed. We both went to bed. And
I went to the living room. So my husband's asleep.
Yeah.
Chris is asleep, or she's went to bed.
Yeah.
And I went out to the living room, and I'm like, I need to re-listen to the whole album again. So that's what I was doing. I was sitting. So we listened to it together.
Yeah.
And then I went out there and I just started the whole album over and was like, I'm going to listen to it again. And at that point, the lyrics had come out. So I was reading the lyrics with the songs.
Yeah.
When the announcement came.
Okay. So then I get a text, all caps, "Are you awake? It's a double album." And then I texted her back, and I think I said something like, "How is that possible?" And then I hear her come from the living room, busted into the room that I was in, and just like
I leapt onto the air mattress
and I think you screamed into the pillow because Ian was sleeping, and you were just like, so excited, and you're like, "You don't have to listen to it, but I'm gonna go listen to it." And I was like, yes, I'm gonna go to bed because I have to work the next morning.
And that's real friendship, guys.
Yeah, for real though. I debated. Part of me did feel a little guilt of like, I should stay up and listen to this with you, but then I was like, no,
I felt zero qualms about it.
It was self-imposed guilt, I guess.
Okay, so I went back because I'm like, I should take a screenshot of the text. So I can post it on like for fun Insta content. So I said, "Are you awake?" And instead of an E at the end, I put an R. So it's like, "Are you at work?" It's a double album. There's another album right now. All in caps. And you just said, "What? How?" And then what's funny is this is not planned.
Yeah.
I'm finding this just now. Later that day, I wrote Mandisa died. And you put, "What? How?"
Oh my gosh. That's just my stock response for any surprising news.
Also, so I'm probably going to post this whole thing.
Please do.
But the next thing you said, "What? How?" Said Mandisa died. I said, "They haven't said yet." And I said, "Hot take. Don't let us know someone died unless we can know how."
Yes, seriously, I agree.
Which is probably a toxic thing for me to have said because Mandisa was a real person who really died, and I'm not entitled to information about it. But I was just annoyed that they announced that she had died.
Yeah.
And then didn't tell us anything about what happened. I still don't really know what happened. But anyway, I will post the screenshots of this chaotic conversation in our Insta stories this week. But
so the songs get stuck in my head quite often, actually, but there are no songs that I've been itching to re-listen to since then, and like I said, I probably only got 4 or 5 deep into the second part of the album. So I haven't gone back and finished listening to the second part of the album. So
I'm wondering if you'll like them. I'm trying to remember what's on the second half.
I was really trying to do it before this podcast, but I didn't get done. So
I
sometimes
feel like
when I start like trying to force myself to do something, then I just
resist
it more.
Just like rebel against your own
against myself, my self-imposed will.
So I just don't know if you'll like it. Like, I think that the first half is more your speed. The second half is more like Evermore. Like, she worked primarily with Jack Antonoff on the first
he's the Bleacher guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
And then she primarily worked with Aaron Dessner on the second half, and he is from the National, and he did a lot of work on Folklore and Evermore, and he's got more of that like acoustic-y sound. So I really like it, but I also it seems like everyone's loving this album. Maybe that's just because I'm on like Taylor Swift algorithm.
I haven't heard any bad things about it.
I hear really positive things about it. I actually got a bunch of because I started watching some negative stuff, and so then I started getting a bunch of negative stuff, which I think is a lot of it was super valid, because I think this is even positive reviews I'm seeing describe this album as messy, which messy and chaotic, which I think
I could agree with that.
Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me that there are people who don't like this album.
Well, when you shove that much work together in one
many songs,
like, it would be really hard, I think, to have it be like a straight line.
Just a win. Yeah, exactly. And as a fan, I am so happy. Like, it's like, oh my God, more music. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But it does, like, it's honestly like like, it was like that night there was so much music, it's like you can't almost even tell if it's good anymore, because like at a certain point you're just so inundated with like Swift-isms that you just like lose it.
I do think sonically though it did feel fairly consistent, at least the first part.
I would agree with
fairly consistent for me sonically.
I think the second half is also consistent sonically, but to a different. They're not. The two albums are not consistent to each other.
Yes, right. What I listened to of the second part did seem much less focused on the music, which I think is also kind of true in the first part, but somehow it's different.
Ian also has
in the
that
second
opinion.
part. The sonically, it's just like, from what I heard, I don't remember anything musically interesting from the second part, but I do remember her talking a lot about her situations, which is all of the music,
right?
But,
she's very self-referential, which on the night of, you actually mentioned, you're like, I can't relate to like most of these songs because it's kind of just Taylor Swift lore. It's not like it's Taylor Swift lore, but it's hyper relatable to the average woman.
To me, right?
Like, most of these songs are. This is about
Maddie
Taylor
Healy
Swift.
broke my heart.
Very
I'm like,
specific.
I can't relate.
And again, I think that is a valid criticism of like, I don't mind that so much because I'm used to listening to Taylor Swift talk about her life, and that's something I enjoy. But it's not like widely playable.
I think it is really beneficial for people who are really interested in the Taylor Swift universe to enjoy this album. Like, I think those two kind of almost are. She doesn't really have any songs of the songs that I've listened to that aren't deeply rooted in her lore. Yeah. And I think you do kind of have to have a certain type of investment in her life and who she is as a person,
and in the really like desiring to like pick apart like, what is this metaphor about? Who is this about? Right. Which I don't love, because I feel like in my mind there's a separation between like understanding that Taylor Swift is a real human person, and I do not know her. Right. And I do not have a relationship with her. She is not my friend. And so like my relationship is with this kind of brand and like artistic vision that she's put out. Yeah. But it's like, I would prefer if not that her music were less self-referential, but just like if it were a little bit more relatable. And I don't know, just like
maybe just more balance,
because I don't want to have to be like, it's annoying after a certain point, like, and for most people at any point, to have to like, oh, like like, not, I just wish not everything had to be about, like, well, is this about Travis or is this about Maddie?
Right.
It's like, what if it's just a song? Like, can we just listen to a song?
Which, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I wonder
I don't love that aspect of a Swiftie.
Right.
Like, and being a Swiftie, that's what people assume, is that you're trying to figure out who it's about. And I'm like.
But I wonder if Taylor has leaned into that
that scared me so bad.
Yeah.
Okay, going slower made it worse. Why did you do that?
Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
I just saw Julia have the deer in headlights look, and Ian
because I saw his feet first, and so I thought it was like an animal. So like he's wearing like a light colored top that kind of blends in with the wall on first sight, like in your periphery. And then he's wearing like dark sneakers.
Okay.
And so I saw the movement and the dark on the floor, and I was like, it's a raccoon, it's a badger, I don't know. It scared me. I'm very easily scared.
Yeah.
Please don't try to scare me. Okay, I don't appreciate it.
She actually will get really mad.
I will get very angry. I don't appreciate being taken advantage of in this way.
I don't think this is anything we've ever actually discussed, but for some reason I don't think I've ever in the course of our friendship have tried to scare you.
Thank God.
Because I think I just in my gut know that you are a person who really is like does not appreciate that.
Thank you. I love that about us.
Is for me a little bit of a bummer, because I do like scaring people and I do like playing pranks, but
yeah, okay,
you're not the most like pranky person.
Side note, Taylor Swift. I would almost refer to you as Taylor Swift. We need to wrap up our Taylor Swift conversation.
Oh yeah.
But side note,
yeah,
Chris told me this family story about how they tend to prank her mother. I don't know if it's just your mom or
it's not
people.
Exclusive to my mom.
So when that person, whenever said person who is being pranked goes to the bathroom at like a social gathering, everyone else will get up and hide. And so when they come out of the bathroom, they're alone. And that makes me physically ill. Like the idea of that, of being at someone's house, especially someone who I don't know, which is the story you've told me of your mother being at a house of someone she's never been to their house before. That's the
most dramatic one we've ever done before.
And that would genuinely make me so mad.
Oh my gosh.
And I feel like this is, I'm going to end this because I want to keep talking about Taylor Swift.
Okay.
But like, I feel like that's interesting for us in the dynamic of being youngest children, because I feel like as a youngest child you either lean hard into the pranking and the being teased and the like jokiness of it all because you have to, or you absolutely form a resentment to it, and that is where I am at in my life. And if I am the butt I have a terrible sense of humor. Like anytime I am the butt of any joke, if I sense that people are making fun of me in any way, I have just a visceral reaction where I just immediately clam up because I hate it. I hate feeling like I'm being made fun of or teased, or that I am
the butt of the
joke. I hate it.
Yeah.
And I know that makes me not a great person to be around, or like super go with the flow. I'm not. I think like I genuinely like I know this is a dramatic thing to say, but I think it's kind of a trauma response. Like I think that my way of handling it was to just rebel against it so deeply. I never learned to cope with it.
I do feel a type of aggressiveness from you that comes like surfaces in those moments, and I'm like, whoa, like there is more. I think there's more going on there, but we're not gonna
we don't have time to dig into that today.
But I on the flip side of that, I sometimes I wonder if I don't have great boundaries with like people in the way they talk to me, because I'll just play into the joke or I'll laugh about it, because that's maybe like kind of how I cope with it. So it's like, so I'm not willing to say something as just a response of like, everyone, like I just need to make sure there's no conflict here. And so that really sucked what you said to me, but ha ha ha, like you know, or I tend to get kind of passive aggressively sarcastic with people. Like I'll play into the joke a little bit, but in a little bit of a mean way of like, oh yeah, yep, that's me. Like
we're both thinking of the same story right now, I think, but we're not going to talk about that. I know we're not going to talk about that,
but so that is interesting. I've never thought about that, like youngest kid dynamic.
Well, I know, I feel like very confident that's why I do that.
Yeah,
because I feel that it's an inordinate, like you said, like amount of aggression towards being made fun of, and nothing. I'm not gonna be like, it's something I can't help, but it is something that is very innate in me that I don't. It's not easy for me to overcome that. Like I am kind of a party killer in that sense of like once I'm feel pointed out in that way, I'm done.
Kind of clam up and just you're like, all right, I'm done with this and that's something, interaction. And
I literally will just like, I'm gonna abandon every friendship in this room. Just bail. I'm working. I would say I'm working on it. I'm not actually actively working on it, but it is something I'm aware of.
Yeah,
and would like to improve on at some point.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I talk about in therapy, which is like just having things that are overdeveloped. Like you just overdevelop certain skills or certain things that help you cope as a kid, and then it's a really gruesome process to try to unlearn that or like undevelop some of that or something, like kind of walk it back a little bit. So
anyway, so
Taylor Swift.
Back to Taylor Swift. She has some crazy coping mechanisms.
She really does.
Well, they say that you never, obviously this is a huge generalization, but they say that you don't mature past the age that you get famous at. Like I've heard that about famous people.
That is interesting.
And so she got famous at like 15, 16, and sometimes she very much has the attitude of kind of a 15, 16-year-old. I'm not saying that's who she is. Like I said,
right.
I think I was going into this before of like, I think it's important to have a very firm separation of like enjoying someone's art, but also like not idolizing that person. So like I love Taylor Swift and I love her music, but I recognize that I don't know her as a person. Like, and that's where I think Swifties get weird. Is it's like we know her. We're all in this secret club together. Yeah, she's speaking directly to us, right? And like she's fed into that, and so like it's fun to participate in sometimes, but it's also like we don't know her. Like you don't know her. Yeah. And she does come off very vindictive a lot of time, and. Yeah, I just think that shows in a lot of her songwriting, and that feels sort of immature.
Well, and part of me wonders if that's just her playing this role that she's kind of been typecasted in.
Sure, absolutely.
And we don't, like, I think that's the separation you're talking about. Like, we don't know for sure.
Right.
If she's just elaborating or kind of padding things to feed the flock, so to speak, you know, or if that's really genuinely how she feels. Because that's something I think for me, as just in thinking about my own writing or my own creating, personally, I want to be a very honest, genuine, authentic person, but I've also had to come to realize that in art, when you're creating, you like almost can't just stick to the things that you know, or like stick to like who you are, because then your art is going to be kind of small. Does that make sense? And like, and I think that to me, I'm like, well, if you embellish at all, or if you say something that's not true, then it's just, you are discrediting like your validity or something. Like it's just like this really serious, everything is black and white, tit for tat type of thing. And like even I've worked with this producer a couple times, and we were talking about some of his music, and I was saying how I loved one of these songs, and he was like, oh yeah, I remember that one. And he's like, actually, because he references him and this girl going to this specific concert. I think it's Weezer. I think he says Weezer. Like we went to this
Weezer.
Yeah, we went to this Weezer concert, and he was like, oh yeah, we actually went to a different concert of like a different band, and part of me felt lied to. You know what I mean? Like part of me was like, you can't do that. Like you can't just fabricate this thing that never happened. But I think as I've been growing a little bit in my artistic journey, if you can call it that, it's like, well, does
art is
really
so subjective.
Yeah, right. Like does it really
does it
matter
have to
if
be
you're
fully autobiographical?
Right. Because like, are you gonna throw away a whole song because you can't find something to rhyme with Grateful Dead instead of Weezer? Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I don't know. It's an interesting, thing that I've been.
And also just when you have so many eyes on you, I can't imagine how much thought and paranoia goes into curating your public persona
Yeah.
when you put out a new album. Anyway, all that being said, my new ranking. Sorry, I'm trying to move this along. I don't want to talk about Taylor Swift the whole time.
Yeah, sure.
But as of right now, this will probably change.
Okay.
But as of right now, I have ranked Tortured Poets Department as my number 5 album. 5 out of 11.
Okay, that's like actually way higher than I thought it was going to be.
Same. Because when I think it just takes me a while to get used to something new.
Yeah.
So when it first dropped, I was not sure about it. I definitely liked the sound of it, but it was a lot more mellow than I expected it to be. And I was just getting used to it. But I really love her lyricism. I will say, I know I sound really negative, like, and people are gonna be like, do you even like Taylor Swift? She has gotten so wordy, and I feel like she needs to pare back just a little bit.
Interesting, because that is what I like about her now.
Okay, don't get me wrong, I love that about her. She really leaned into that with Folklore and Evermore.
Yeah.
And got really good feedback because we all loved it.
Right.
We loved the vocab words.
Okay.
I love a wordiness queen. I don't know. When I am writing, when I do write, which is not very often, but when I'm writing, I tend to be very wordy. And that was always the feedback I got in classes was like, you need to like be more. No, because it's like I'm using every word, especially when I was in high school.
Like just an excess in
like just word salad, kind of like throwing a thesaurus at the wall kind of thing. And that was my type of writing, especially in high school. And so my teachers are like, you can be a good writer and still have like a concise sentence, you know, like you don't have to say everything super. In the book world, we call it like purple writing. I don't know exactly why, but if it's like, oh, that writing's so purple, it's like just very like wordy and embellished and extravagant.
Interesting.
And I do think she's good at that, but I think she's leaned into it so much that she's lost the ability to like edit herself a little bit.
Okay,
like, I think there's some lines where it's like, like. I'm not going to give examples because that would just take too long for me to think of them. Yeah. But just, I think that she really leaned into that on this album because we were like, yes, vocab, we love it. And then now she's like, sanctimoniously performing soliloquies I'll never see. That's a line from one of the songs. And it's like, you could have said something different. Like, you didn't have to say it like that.
Right.
But you know what? She's making money. So who do I care? Yeah. But anyway, number 5. So it's After Lover, Before Speak Now.
Okay.
Right in the middle there.
Wow.
So, and then I wanted to give a top 3 favorite songs from each of the albums.
Oh.
So 6 songs total, but I'm counting them as 2 different albums.
Okay.
So my favorite upon first listen was Down Bad. It's still one of my favorites. Yeah. I really love Down Bad. Guilty as Sin is another one. I love Guilty as Sin. That one has stayed. Love that. And then I also really loved I Can Do It With a Broken Heart.
Me too.
Upon first listen. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to it as much in the weeks after its release. The one that has grown on me the most, so this isn't one of my 3, this is a bonus one.
Okay.
But the one that's grown on me the most is Fresh Out the Slammer.
Yeah.
Which I thought I wouldn't like at all based off of the name. And then I listened to it and I'm like, yep, I was right. I didn't like that at all. And now I like, it's in my head all the time. And I love the sound of the verses. Like the na, 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 na. I love the sound of it. Yeah, and so those are my favorites from the first one. And then the second one, my favorites are The Black Dog.
I did like that one. I do remember liking
I think that's
that
one of the best ones across the board. I think that one's great. I Look in People's Windows.
I did not get to that one.
It's a shorty, but it's a goodie. I really liked that one. And then I also liked Robin. It's a little weird, but it's beautiful and the melody's great. Bonus. I really liked the manuscript, and that's actually the one that I got the bonus track for on the vinyl that I ordered, because I am not insane and I wasn't going to order all 4 of the vinyls to get the bonus tracks, because guess what, all the bonus tracks were on the second album. So shut up, Taylor Nation. I'm not going to blame Taylor for that. Whoever runs her merch, shut up now.
Right.
Stupid.
That feels a little bit
stupid and dumb. But the one that's been stuck in my head recently that I didn't like on first listen, but now it's a grower, is called The Bolter. So I know you couldn't get through that. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Taylor Swift.
Lovely.
Wrapping that up.
Actually, quick hot take. So I've been listening to so much Reliant K since last week.
Tap in if you've also been listening to Reliant K since the
Seriously.
episode last week.
And if you haven't been, you should be, because they're just, man, so good. But hot take, I was thinking about it, and I think that Taylor Swift and Reliant K write very similarly. I just hear a lot of similarities in the analogies they use and like the metaphors, or like the type of picture they paint with their music. They use this language that can mean two things at the same time a lot. And like it's just a lot of interesting wordplay that if you're not paying attention, then you'll miss it. But it's like kind of crucial to the song.
Yeah,
so
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, welcome
to Good Soup.
We haven't done a welcome. I think we didn't do it.
We keep forgetting.
I know.
So we tend to do this thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Good.
We tend to do this thing where I will just start talking while Chris does mic check.
Yeah.
And at some point she just presses record. And I know this, so I'm just kind of rambling.
Yeah.
I have such a hard time if we're like,
here we
and
go.
now we start. So I just kind of start talking to Chris, like just in the mic as she's checking my mic. And then at some point we just start.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, we've gotten out of the habit of like introducing the pod, because usually we're just off the ground running.
Yeah.
So
we usually get into something.
It's always something. Fun fact, we almost never plan. Like we just are like, we're going to record this day? Sure.
Yeah.
And then we find something to talk about.
I feel like even when we do have a semblance of a plan, we rarely ever follow it. Or I feel like we bring up the subject and it's like, what do you have about that? Nothing. I have nothing about that.
All right.
Nothing to say.
Rolling on through.
But one thing we did talk about a little earlier, or you brought up the idea of talking about what we thought our life would look like versus how it's turned out up to this point.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of it specifically in relation to relationships.
Oh, okay.
So Chris and I, well, I just don't, if this is not a segment we want to keep, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, we can.
But like, because I don't want it to be like, yeah, like you're single or you've been single and I've been married and that's our lives.
That is what it is, though.
But that's
those are the facts.
I don't want to reduce it to that. But just as friends, we have so much in common. But I feel like it's been really interesting and enlightening through our friendship to learn so much. I've learned so much from you, I feel like, because I met my husband when I was 14. We started dating when I was 17, and we were married by the time I was 19. So
I honestly cannot even fathom.
I know. And
That's wild.
Ian and I have been married for almost 8 years. And I think I've mentioned this before, but one of the first things on the pod, I can't even talk. Maybe we shouldn't do anything serious today.
Yes.
But when I met Chris for the first time, I had thought she was one of the married couple, like one of the married people in our college group, because I'd seen someone on the Facebook group and I thought that she was married, and I'm like, oh cool, like another married college student, like I'll probably connect with her. And so but it was all like through a Facebook icon, so I couldn't really see the person. And I saw Chris and I thought she sort of resembled the Facebook picture. So I was like, hey, like, are you married? And Chris went, I wish. And that was like the first time I ever met her.
And that was 4 years ago now?
4 years ago.
That's wild.
Anyway, and so, but we've talked a lot about how I jokingly, because it's like, oh, it's kind of like a magic spell sort of, or like a magic potion of like, I thought that I would never get married. I was like, I'm ready to be single forever. I want to be a missionary. I'm gonna leave the country and live on my own somewhere, and that's what I'm gonna do with my life. And then I ended up getting married almost as young as possible.
Honestly.
And then Chris was like, I'm gonna get married immediately, and then has been up until recently single. And just how interesting that dynamic is, but also just like navigating your early 20s as a single person versus as a married person.
Jinx.
I
think this is a really interesting conversation because we do have two wildly different perspectives on it, and I think it's really helpful for people to hear both, because I think we have listeners on both sides. you know, and even I think we maybe even have some listeners that are older than me and still single, or, you know, not still, but are currently single.
Yeah.
And so I think we both have a unique perspective to give on the matter, and I think it'd be really fun to talk about.
Cool. Let's do it.
Let's just keep talking about how much we should talk about it.
That's what the people want.
We're gonna be like,
they want just little prefaces and no actual content.
We're just gonna give you crumbs, never the actual meal.
Yeah.
No. Okay. So maybe.
Do you think it's harder to be married or to be single?
Apples and oranges.
Yeah. That was kind of a trick question.
I think. Okay. This might be a good way to approach it. So I'll say a couple of the pros that I think, what are some of the pros of being single in your 20s? And then you can say a couple of the pros of being married in your 20s. And then like maybe we can do some of the cons.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Spicy.
Okay. Sweet. So some of the pros of being single periodically, because I was not like straight single throughout my 20s.
She was gay single.
Oh my gosh.
Did you see the joy in my eyes? You just laid that right out for me.
You couldn't even get through the whole joke without. Oh my gosh, that was so funny. Oh, okay, so I was not always single in my 20s.
Right, you were dating.
Yes, so I had
She was on the market.
Yeah, I was on and off the market. Market price, please.
Is that what you mean?
I don't know. I'm a lobster.
Ooh, 25 cents per pound, baby.
Worth it.
It's like the cheapest lobster I've ever heard. I couldn't think of another number.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I think some of the pros, though, of being single periodically throughout my 20s is the simple fact that I just feel like now that I'm older, I've had more experiences and I've learned a lot about relationships from people that I've been around and married couples that I've been around, other single people I've been around. And I think I just know so much more about myself because I can like think about myself all the time, basically, you know, like it's just what it is,
it's
you
just
know,
reality.
Having experienced mostly all of my 20s, because I'm 29, especially in the last like year or two, I've just learned so much about myself and have done a lot of healing, and there's been a lot of really hard times. I think I've just learned so much more about how I deal with things and what I want, what I don't want. I think about now the people that I was with or the people that I thought I wanted to be with, and honestly, all I can think of when I think about that is like, thank goodness I did not marry them. Not that they're terrible people.
No.
But it's just like where I'm at now in my life. Like, I don't know that I would be living here in Nashville, and I don't know that I would be in the church community I'm in if I were married to someone already and starting a family or something. And that's the other thing, like even my idea of what I want out of a family life has drastically changed, even in like the last couple months of just having asked myself more about, why do I want kids? How many kids do I want? What do I really want my future to look like? And I think the difference of being almost out of your 20s versus coming into your 20s is the dreaming, I think, can become a lot more realistic for your life because you just have so much more experience behind you. And I think that by the time you're, you know, approaching your 30s, you just have a better grasp or like a better frame of reference for things that are possible and maybe things that are not possible. Or for me personally, I feel like I also have an easier time of letting things go. Like, I think when I was younger, if I had a dream, I felt like I had to keep that and hold on to it, or else basically I think it made me feel like a type of a failure because I had this wild dream and then it didn't come to fruition. And so that says something about me as a person or my self-discipline or my character. And that's just simply not true. Like, dreams come and go. And so I think, and even the physiological process of your brain developing, like that doesn't complete until you're like 26.
Yeah.
So you're basically walking around up until you're 26 with this still forming brain, and then by the time you're getting into your 30s, you only have 4 years of experience with a fully formed brain.
I think it's 25.
Oh, is it 25?
Okay.
I
also don't think it's like super definite. I think it's different for everybody, but
ish.
I've always heard 25.
Okay, so yeah, somewhere around 25.
And for me, it was definitely 25. I literally felt my brain like finish cooking.
Yeah.
Like a couple days before my 25th birthday, it was literally like, it was like ding. Like I literally felt my brain being done.
Turkey's ready.
That's insane.
That is wild.
Anyway, sorry. Yeah. That's a side
note.
No.
So,
and yes, I still got married before that time.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
That was so crazy.
That is.
But please take that into account. Your brain is not done yet.
And
doesn't mean you can't make it work or that it can't be wonderful or exactly what God's calling you to. Sorry, I'm not trying to take over your second.
No, it's okay.
But take it into account. Your brain is not done yet.
No, right. Yeah. And yeah, I think those are valid points that it doesn't negate, like, if you are getting married young. Like, I know plenty of people who have gotten married young and they have great marriages and all that stuff. But yeah, like, your brain is not fully formed when you're 18 or 19, and despite what the world or other people would try to tell you, that you should have everything figured out and stuff like that. Ooh. And through my recent counseling experience, I've learned that with my fully formed brain, I have these neural pathways that are ingrained in that fully formed brain that aren't always to my benefit. Mm-hmm. Like, some of them are
like perhaps getting deeply offended when you are made fun of at the butt of the joke.
Maybe something like that.
Some kind of neural coping pathway. We don't know.
Or like, one of mine is attaching my worth so intensely to my preferences, like movies I like or music I like, and then
don't even get me started on that.
And then upon sharing them with people, if they don't, what?
I just keep talking. I'm like, stop interrupting
me
her.
that.
Oh
no,
my
it's
God.
Fine. And then upon, sharing those things that I've intensely attached my worth to, sharing those with other people, and then not getting a reaction that they're not intensely reacting to the thing that I'm sharing with them that I have intensely attached my worth to, then obviously A plus
they
B
don't care about
C,
me at all.
Yeah, and they don't understand me, or they don't know me deeply because they don't get why I love this movie. Like, wow, that is crazy. So I think it's things like that where, and like those types of things, like my coping mechanisms, or how I haven't maybe fully healed from past experiences or trauma, because like I don't even think I think we all experience quote unquote trauma in different ways and different degrees, but I don't even think you have to have like a wild crazy trauma in your past to have created certain ways that you survive when you're younger. Or
I feel like I'm learning that like right now in my life. That's so crazy that you would say that,
right? I know. and it takes work to reorient those pathways, though. And it takes work, and it's really hard to honestly look at yourself and accept who you are really. And I do think for a lot of my life, I've had this distorted view of myself. I think I just took this messaging of, like, you are really special, you're really valued, like, God created you and formed you in the womb, like, really uniquely, and you're captivating, and someone should pursue you. I think I took those messages that are true, but, like, distorted them, and then kind of put myself on this pedestal of, like, I'm the greatest thing to ever walk on planet Earth. And even though I wouldn't... What?
Nothing.
What is that face you're making?
I don't know.
Are you heartily agreeing in your spirit? LOLs. Okay, but then it's fine. It's true.
There was a point, I think, at your unhealthiest.
Oh, yes.
Where that attitude really showed.
Which was when? I want to know. I'm just 5 minutes ago.
Well, I don't want to I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make...
I am genuinely curious about it. I can cut it out, or we can talk about it later if you don't want to talk about it.
No.
But I really am genuinely curious. Was it what?
No, you say what you think it was.
Was it when I started dating Evan?
So throughout, it wasn't like right when you started dating him.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh my God, but like I'm gonna like cut this out. Like I'm not.
No.
Like this is
Please.
Not because like you are important and special to me,
no,
and it doesn't change. But like
I know,
though, like you didn't talk about anything but yourself for a good 6 to 9 months.
Ooh.
And you just didn't seem to your attitude was very much like you literally said the words like I am the purest hearted person I know. I don't understand why God is letting this happen to me.
No, I didn't. Did I say that?
You said I'm trying to think if it was purest hearted. Yeah, you were like, I'm the purest hearted person I know. I'm glad you think this is funny. I mean, that was probably in like November.
Just is so ridiculous. Like,
because I genuinely didn't know what to do with that. Like it was one of the more awkward parts of our because you said that and you were crying. And I didn't know what to say.
My gosh.
Because I didn't want to invalidate, but I'm like, she's delusional.
How would you respond to that?
I genuinely, I understand that
that is just wild.
Like, it's like you're throwing up kind of,
right.
When you're going through that kind of spiritual stuff and all of those like deeply held beliefs that we like to pretend aren't there, but they're there for all of us.
Yeah.
Kind of just snake their way out. And it was last year was crazy. Like it was crazy for you, but as an observer, it was weird. It was weird.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that is blowing my mind.
I don't want to just it doesn't change anything, and I'm not just trying to be like
genuinely.
But just hearing you say that was like just like a weird thing of connecting those thoughts and not knowing how to say that.
Yes, I think that's a great representation of how distorted my view was in reality of like who I am in relation to all the other people in my life. And I think what was meant to be encouragement or what was meant to fill me with worth or value from my family, from my friends, from...
So more of the story, don't tell your kids they're amazing.
No. Please do tell your kids they're amazing.
You're going to be screwed up no matter what you do.
It doesn't matter.
So quit worrying about it, parents.
Seriously, just do your best and like... But I think that is such a great representation of how even these good things in life, we can take and distort them, because I really feel like I came to this point where, and I think that's honestly why I had so much trouble in relationships, like romantically speaking, in my 20s, was because I didn't understand why I wasn't feeling like so intrinsically valued or like I was kind of expecting, I think, someone to show me that they are also co-signing this pedestal that I'm putting myself on. And it's hard to parse that out in the moment, because I think the things that I'm saying of like, I want to be valued and I want to know that someone wants to be with me are valid things and are actually, yes, green flags you need to be looking for and you should desire in your relationships. But nobody knew, including myself, how truly distorted it was, like really deep in my heart. And I think, honestly, just time was really key in helping me flesh that out more and having it be revealed and come to the surface. And I don't know that I would be having these revelations now without the simple passage of time and like the experiences that I've had in that amount of time. And now I feel like I can see much more clearly, like, oh, well, yeah, sure. Like, thank you for not giving me a relationship that is supposed to last for a lifetime while I didn't have that figured out, because it was never going to work, because they would never be able to fulfill this desire like from me that is kind of expecting and demanding this perfection of, you have to make me feel a certain way. I did not have a team oriented mentality, or like a partnership oriented mentality. I had definitely a mentality of, I am going to be the best wife ever. Genuinely, I really think I thought that. And like,
just out the gate,
no,
I'm prepped and ready to go.
Yeah, like I've listened to enough podcasts, I've read enough books, like I know what this is about.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna choose somebody. So like, not only was I setting myself up in a prideful manner of like, here's how great I am, but then I kind of doubled down on it by saying, I'm going to choose somebody out of my own wisdom and ability that is going to perform and meet all of these ridiculous expectations that I'm living under. The last year was, yes, like really hard, because I think a lot of that was just getting really torn down, and I just didn't understand. Now looking back on it, I can see the pain of kind of getting your pride torn away from you.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't make sense. And praise the Lord, I am so grateful that he used Evan as kind of a vessel to start making that cut. His ability to long suffer with me through that and like see me through that was instrumental in, I think, in me coming to this place of understanding the reality of God's relationship with me, which is like not based on how great I am, and it's not based on how uniquely he's made me and how special I am and how awesome I am. Like, you know, it's like, it's not based on these things. Like, it's solely based on his love and his care for me. And so I think even in my like relationship with God, then I was taking this really distorted view of like, this relationship relies on me, and this relationship is like, God is just up there so pleased with me, like, you know, like I'm the exception to the rule. And it's painful, because I think I was able to get away with it for so long because people around me, like, I think it was just so well camouflaged under genuinely how God has made me, which is like this person that really does want to be kind to people and does want to listen and hear people, and does really want genuine, authentic relationships. And I think I just didn't really have anyone around me that could see through that until like, really honestly, Evan. And it's like, and he was able to delineate for me like, hey, and that's
part of what's different about, like, I'm not saying friends could never do that for you,
right?
But that's part of the difference between like an intimate relationship and like a friendship is like, I would never, like, that's not something that I had picked up on in our friendship, because like, we're friends, like we're not trying to build a life partnership, but when you let someone in that way, they like, kind of get to see you naked and mentally and emotionally, well, both ways, but but just like you're kind of bearing yourself in front of this person,
and they are burdened by your expectations of them romantically, and those expectations are very different
than a friendship. Absolutely.
And I think that's so true. And I think also just genuinely being older and having a little more age maturity helped me actually kind of sit in that a little better than like I maybe would have at an earlier point in my life, where it's like, I just want the pain to be over, which I think is a little bit of a symptom of immaturity, because like, you know, I mean, you have to work your way up to certain pain thresholds, and your stamina just isn't as long when you're younger as it is when you're older. And so I think even then, in like physical age maturity, that really helped me be able to stick in that relationship for a while and then actually leave it for a minute. And then that's when, like, boom, everything just, like, exploded. And it was like, whoa, all of these things are, like, I am doing this to people and I am making people feel this way. And, like, and not in, like, a really like, I think in an appropriate self-reflective way, not like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst person in the world, you know, like, I feel like I didn't swing all the way to the other end of the spectrum, but it was like this true ability to sit for a second and just accept the reality of what my life is at this point, who I am at this point, and the tendencies I have, the coping skills I have, how I operate in relationships, and the simple fact that, like, I am not the prize of prizes of the world. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, you know, like I think this is kind of the final.
I think not that you don't, like, everyone deserves to have friends and loved ones who hype them up and tell them what a prize they are. Right. Like, I think that's part of healthy relationships, but to validate what you're saying, I think it's important to have a healthy view of, I am not all good or all bad. Like, I am a person who has advantages and disadvantages.
Yes.
In a relationship.
Yes. And I just think I was not acknowledging any of really my disadvantages. Mm-hmm. I think I was good at pretending like I did. Like, well,
right, because self-awareness is one of the virtues that makes you such a prize, is you're also so self-aware. And so you have to be aware a little bit.
It's just an endless loop of self-gratification. That's crazy. And I think this is maybe the last thing I'll say about the cons of being, you know, older and single and stuff, but
that was all con?
Or no, pros, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Pros.
I thought this was a pro.
Yes, this was the pros. Is that
having your entire life deconstructed in front of you, pro.
Honestly, it's very painful, but it is a pro.
Yes.
Because you can actually understand what you're working with and make intentional choices moving forward as to how you want to either change or develop or adjust. Like, it's actually a very freeing process. And like I said, it was and will always be. I mean, I don't think this is the last time I'll have to deconstruct who I am and stuff, but it is a very painful process. But the thing that I feel like wraps all of this up and holds all of this is the realization and, like, developing the skill of being able to hold two things to be true at the same time. Like, I just think because I tend to get really passionate about things and because I tend to feel things really deeply, that leads me to this tendency to always think in black and white. Like, it's either this or that. Like, I'm all for God or I'm not. Like, there's no in between, you know, like, passion is yes or no. Like, I'm either all lazy or I'm all not. And there's no
I want merch that says passion is yes or no. That's what I want.
Yes. And it's just always swinging from one end of the spectrum to the next. And these wild, just like, I'm in so much pain because I can't always be this one way all the time. And I just think part of growing up and getting a little older, and, you know, therapy was a big part of helping me realize this, but it's like humans just are not one or the other. Like, we are kind of all these things at the same time. And like you were saying before, like, I can have a security in my worth and in my value, and I can have confidence and I can invest in that and have know, like, my worth. But at the same time, I can also recognize that I'm not the best thing to ever walk the face of the earth, and I'm not any better a prize than anybody else is, and I'm not easier to love than anybody else is. And like, both of those things can be true, and it's like, and it's not, recognizing the negatives doesn't make me self-deprecating, and recognizing the positives doesn't make me egotistical.
Amen.
You know, but that's just a really hard concept to grab onto and to actually let it permeate all my thoughts and my actions. But I can tell you that thought has helped me immensely in relationships, because it gives me the ability to extend so much more grace to people, and it helps me to be able to have much more understanding for people. And I feel like it really affords me this ability to see through someone's actions in a moment and like see who they are, because it's like, well, both can be true. Like, you know, this person can be a really fun person to be around and they can have a bad day. Like, that doesn't, just because they have one bad day doesn't mean they're no longer a fun person to be around.
Yeah.
And I think it just like gives me a lot more freedom to operate in my relationships. And I feel like now I have given people a lot more freedom to operate around me without, you know, even just from my perspective, feeling like I'm constantly taking an inventory of like their emotions and how they're acting, and like this is weird, they don't normally do that. It's like, whoa, chill out, you know, like they're a human, and both things can be true. Like, this person can love you and have hurt you.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so I think that is really one of the big, like the major key things that I think just time and age has helped me come to that realization. And I think that will be something that, you know, I'll carry with me from this point on. So what are some pros that you...
I have nothing nearly this deep and profound. Like, the thing that I thought of just now as we're sitting here is like, you get extra help around the house. Like, I don't know. So getting married young is complicated, and I will not pretend like I've had it all figured out. I don't think any married person has it all figured out. So, young or not, you don't have it figured out. I will say, I guess this isn't really a pro or a con, but I will say that marriage is hard no matter what age you marry at.
Yep.
Like, there's going to be difficulties. And so it's just kind of like, pick your heart.
Yeah.
You know, like, if you want to be married, if you want to share your life with another person, there's going to be road bumps, and they're different depending on how old you are. But they're just always going to be there. And so all the people there were actually a lot of people that were very negative about me getting married when I was so young. And I understand what they were talking about now. At the time, I was like, what haters?
You don't know. You don't notice, like,
they don't know how much love we have. But now I kind of get it. But I also get that it's extremely rude to weigh in on another person's life like that. Like, I just can't imagine doing that to another person. Anyway, if you have a relationship with someone and you know them and love them, maybe then weigh in at an appropriate time.
Yeah.
Don't come up to a person at their shower and tell them all the reasons they shouldn't get married when you've met them like one time.
My gosh.
True stories that have happened to me.
That is wild.
Getting married young, I get it. It's risky business. And it's not for everyone. I'll just say that.
True.
But be kind.
Yeah.
Be kind and supportive to people.
Yeah, like maybe give them some
encouragement,
usable advice or something.
And ask them how you can pray for them. Don't just be like, this seems real dumb.
Yeah.
But anyway, all that being said, I think that when you get married young, I only have the experience of getting married young, so I can't compare it to anything else. But I think it's a little bit easier to transition into building a life with somebody else. I imagine if I were older, getting married older, I hear a lot of people talking about like getting annoyed with the way the other person loads the dishwasher, or I've always done things this way. I've always paid bills this way.
Yeah.
And this is not nearly as interesting as
but you do get kind of stuck in your ways as a single person. Like, you just have your preferences.
Yeah. And like, I have always lived with Ian.
Yeah, right.
Like, I've never not lived with Ian, and not that he doesn't get on my nerves or that we don't do things differently and butt heads about it, but like, I've never known any other system of paying bills, cleaning the house, doing life things. Like, we've truly built a life together.
Yeah.
And I guess this could be a pro or a con depending on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
But literally, like, my entire adult life is with Ian.
Yeah.
Again, could be a pro or con.
Right.
Depending on who you are. But like, we've been married since I was a child. Mm-hmm. So all of my good and bad memories of mm-hmm. adulthood are with him.
Yeah.
And there is just something kind of beautiful and special for me, at least. I think looking back on my life, I will always cherish that we did so much together.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's really what when we decided to get married, we made the decision, and the thing we kept saying to each other was like, no matter what we do in life, we want to do it together.
Yeah.
And so I gave up on college. Not gave up, I'm in college right now. But the first round of college, I decided to drop out mm-hmm. so that I could work full time, so that we could afford to get married and live on our own. Mm-hmm. And that was hard. Like, most adult things are hard. And so mm-hmm. I'm not saying, oh, that's only hard if you get married. But like, we decided to do some things sort of, I guess, harder and unconventional, of like, we took turns going to school.
Yeah.
So that we could afford to get married young. Mm-hmm. So I worked full time for 4 years while he went to school. And then he has been working full time while I've been in school. And we didn't really get past that. So we're getting to the end of our plan now from when we first got married. And that's gosh, weird.
That is weird.
Like, we were like, we'll figure it out after. And now I'm like,
it's like almost after.
It's almost after. I'm like, what am I supposed to do now? And so I love that. And as much as there have been hard times, and it's been a lot different than I thought it would be when I signed up for it.
Sure. Which I think is probably true.
That's true of anything. Yeah. Because going back to what we said before, I do think, from what I've heard from other wise people, mm-hmm. is that you change constantly throughout your life.
Yeah.
And that's part of why marriage is so hard, is because you're not the same person you were mm-hmm. when you got married mm-hmm. several years into it. But I think it's especially true throughout your 20s, because
yes.
your early 20s, especially early to mid 20s, you're really doing a lot of that sort of cliche, but true soul searching, finding yourself, figuring out who you are. But when you're married, you have another person standing there watching you do it.
Right.
And that can be
probably doing it themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And so you're just growing and changing so much. Mm-hmm. And we aren't the same people mm-hmm. we were when we got married. And thankfully, we've found a way to grow together. Yeah. And find a new type of relationship, find a new way to get along. I guess that sounds kind of casual. I don't mean it that way. But just like our relationship now is so different than when we first got married, in lots of good ways and some, I don't want to say not so good ways, but it's just different mm-hmm. because when we got married, we were different people. Yeah. Can I emphasize that anymore? Oh my God. Do I have anything else to say? Chris just like killed it so hard with her section, and now I'm like, I don't have anything to say. I'm just here. I'm just doing it. Like, marriage is kind of one of those things. It's like accruing interest, you know? It's mm-hmm. like, if you're not actively working on it, it can kind of just happen without. So when people are like, give us advice, or like, what do you think about marriage? I'm like, so part of it's just happened to me.
Do it.
Part of it has been really intentional. Yeah. And like growing and choosing to grow together and mm-hmm. working on our relationship. But a lot of it has just been like mm-hmm. a tree growing in the ground. Yeah. Like, it's just, we're here now.
And I don't know if you find this to be true, but I imagine this to be true for people who especially get married really young, like mm-hmm. before or in their early 20s. You like almost don't know enough about it to be scared of it, so you kind of just do it, versus like when you're older, you now understand more about like I was thinking about it in terms of like, you probably haven't been hurt as much or as deeply, or like you just haven't had as many experiences maybe where people have let you down, or mm-hmm. like you just don't understand like logistically kind of how things can go wrong. Like, you like your life experiences are just more or limited. Limited. Absolutely. And so do you think that is kind of like the quote unquote pro of like, you don't really have time to think about it, you just do it, like you just jump in, it's like, here we go?
Yes and no. I think that Ian and I dated a couple guys before mm-hmm. Ian and I got together, but nothing like super duper serious. Yeah. Ian, I don't think ever dated anyone seriously. He like had girls that he like talked to, but I don't think it ever got beyond that.
Right.
And so like in some ways I feel really ill-experienced when we hit roadblocks in our relationship, but in other ways like I think our expectations were not nothing, but we just didn't have this like, here's how we're gonna be as husband and wife. Like people always, like when we did premarital counseling, people kept talking to us about expectations.
Yeah.
Like make sure you're not having too high of expectations and that you're like, that was just a word we heard all the time.
Wow. Yeah.
And I like, we just didn't have a ton and still don't really like relational expectations because we just only knew each other. Like our relationship has almost no comparison because for both of us, like this is our relationship.
Yeah.
This is our life.
Yeah.
Like it is just kind of happening. And like, granted, we are intentional about it. Like I'm not trying to say like we're just lazy and we just live together and that's it. But like we are such a big part of each other's lives that it's just sort of ingrained into what we do.
Yeah.
Like because we've been together for so long and we don't really know any different.
Right.
And again, I think that could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who you are.
Yeah.
I think that it does help us to like not, I get into comparison just because I struggle with that in general. And I think that is a cause of issues just because I compare myself to the idea of like what this thing should be, or if I'm like we're not doing something and someone says something and I'm like, should we be doing that? Or like a person on TV says that this is what they do, is this normal?
Right.
Like, but it's not based off of actually like, oh, my ex-boyfriend did it this way and I missed that, or like or I was hurt by this person and I need you to make up for that.
You don't have like actual experiences to compare.
Right. And so like
to.
I feel like our not preferences, but the things that bother us and the things that make us feel loved and safe are very like unadulterated, you know, because it's like, this bothers me because it genuinely bothers me, not because
I wish you would do it like this other person.
Right. It reminds me of this guy or like, or I feel like this is how this person did it. So this is how relationships should be.
Yeah.
So I think that there's an innocence to that, which can sometimes make me feel immature and make me feel like I don't know anything about the world or relationships. But I think it's added an element of ease to our relationship because it's not as much work in that way.
Right. Like you don't flinch every time like, oh, well, I used to date someone who did that, or like, you know, not like physically hit you, but just like, you know, emotionally flinch.
Yeah. Whatever it is for you, for you specifically. Oh man, I was going to say something. I forgot what it was. Oh, shoot. No, but you just changed so much through those years. And I understand now what people were talking about, like when they would split up and say like, well, we just grew apart. Yeah. Like I understand now how that happens because I've seen us change so much and like deal with the repercussions of that, good and bad. Yeah. And I feel like that has been really intentional in our relationship of like staying connected, staying communicative about our changing needs and our growing needs and who we are as people, continually getting to know each other in that way. I had another great point I was going to make and I forgot what it was, but
well, I do feel like being married.
I remember what it was. Yeah. No, you go ahead.
Are you sure? I don't want you to lose it again.
I'm going to put it right here.
Okay. I feel like being married through such a quote unquote turbulent time of like your personal life, going through your 20s and all the identity stuff, and like I do feel like that would almost reinforce your commitment, or like kind of like trial by fire of like, are you going to choose to stay with this person through this really chaotic like span of years where your brain is still developing and you're changing into these wildly like maybe not wildly different people, but your preferences are changing, or like your beliefs are shifting, and all of these, like I think I feel as though that would really help solidify like your choice of being committed to each other throughout those changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I feel like I've told Chris this before. I feel like all of my marriage advice is just wildly unsexy, you know, like other than advice about actual sex, like all of my advice is so just like unsexy. Yeah. Of like, I honestly like, there is such beauty in commitment and not just I feel this way right now in this moment. Yeah. Like I love that we're committed to each other even when we're not feeling it in the moment. Like it is something that is so easy to lean back on. And I actually remember when you first started dating Evan, and you were going through I think really normal questions of like, well, how do we work through this problem? How do we work through this problem? And I realized how short all of my advice was, because for me, a lot of my advice is you just lean on that commitment. Like, you have time to work through it because you're committed to this person. Yeah. And so like I had no frame of reference for a relationship where you're not just like committed for life. What? Because so much of my problem solving is based off of, we're gonna work through this somehow. Yeah, but like this is going to work out because it has to.
The weird part about relationships though is like, when do you cross that threshold?
Right.
Like,
I don't know. I've never dated as an adult. Well, so I don't know.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know either. Like, I guess you just you kind of look at each other and say like, are we still deciding that? Yep. Okay. And then all of a sudden you have a ring on, and like, but even in that, like, you still have to keep making that choice.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Yeah. So
it's. Anyway, so what I was going to say was, because you asked me a question and it made me think of this, but then I got off track. What did you ask me? You asked me a really great question. Okay. But one thing that it made me think of was, again, being in premarital counseling and having a lot of people weighing in and being passionate about our lives and trying to protect us. Yeah. Which is great. Yeah. A little unhelpful, but, I get it. 2 young kids getting married, like, I kind of get it, but it still was stupid. But I was so prepared for marriage to just suck ass. Like, everyone just talked about like
it's gonna be super hard,
because what you were saying was like, when you're that young, like, you don't know any different, so you just kind of do it. Yeah, which I think I said was a little bit true. Like, it is sort of true, but I was hyper aware of like, I know I'm young, I know I'm stupid, but I have to prove that I'm not just doing this based off of my hormones. I'm not just doing this based off of my wild feelings. I'm in love, but that's not the only reason I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it's practical as well. Like, I had a whole like comeback in my mind, because there was a lot of opposition to what I was doing, and so I felt like I had to have a good justification. Yeah. And people were just constantly reminding me of how hard marriage is, and it's not gonna be fun forever, and it's gonna, like, whatever.
Which, I'm sorry, but that to me opens up this whole other can of worms of like, kids can't do hard things.
Ooh, I never even thought of that.
Which I vehemently oppose that. But
yeah, okay, that should be like our kids camp theme of the summer. I love that.
Seriously, like, ugh,
no,
barf.
But like, funnily enough, I do want to throw this in as a side note. My parents were very supportive. Both of our parents were 100% on board with our decision. I am so grateful, because I would be terrified. I would be pooping my pants. Sure. Again, now I'm realizing, having just a couple years out of it, I'm like, whoa, 19, that's crazy. Yeah. But like, my parents very much were like, do whatever you want, kid, we don't care. But they saw that I had made the decision. Yeah. And they were like, all right, like, you can do this. Like, very much what you're saying of just like, you can do this. Like, if this is what you want to do, we'll support you, and you're gonna do it. And
Mr.
like,
and Mrs. Mansfield, you guys are the best.
That's Huffman.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You guys are also the best.
Also Mr. and Mrs. Mansfield. Mrs. Mansfield. I don't know what their conversations were like with Ian when I wasn't around.
Okay, we don't know if you're awesome, Mr. and Mrs.
No, they are. I know. I'm talking specifically about my parents.
Yes, the Huffmans.
Yes, the Huffmans, because once I made the decision, they were like, okay. Yep. And I just was like, okay, this is gonna be terrible, but I want to do this. I want to, like I said, like,
kudos
whatever
to you,
whatever
seriously.
we do in our lives, we want to do it together. And so it's gonna be hard, and we're just gonna do it. And I've joked about this several times, and I've even said the opposite of this in this podcast, but marriage isn't that hard. Just kidding. It's complicated, but when we got married, I started going through some pretty serious mental health things. So the first couple years of marriage were really hard for me, but it wasn't the marriage that was hard. Yeah. It was me having, so I lived with my parents until I got married. So I moved an hour away from them for the first time, and being married, I think I was experiencing what you are experiencing now. Like, I don't think you have to be married to experience this.
No.
But what is just like having someone see you in your mess for kind of the first time. Like, Ian and I were open and honest with each other throughout our dating experience, but we didn't live together.
Right.
And we were also long distance. Yeah. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I don't think we were ill prepared. Like, it's not like we were strangers to each other.
Like, adds a different element.
But when we're together all the time for the first time.
Right.
And I couldn't hide my depression anymore. Like, our engagement really was a Band-Aid over my depression. Like, I was okay through our engagement because I was so excited.
Yeah.
But I was depressed. Like, I was starting to undergo some actual mental health, meaning like my brain was starting to malfunction as I was developing as a adolescent,
right? And
I was able to get through it for the engagement, but once we got married, I really broke down because all I had was Ian then, and he's still kind of getting to know this side of me. Anyway, all that's a whole other episode. But marriage itself wasn't hard. I'm sure it was much harder for Ian because he had to kind of carry us for a little while. So he probably has a different perspective.
That's okay.
But my experience of marriage was Ian's unconditional support and love and being there for me when he didn't understand what I was going through. Like, didn't see what was happening. Like, I mean that as in, like, Ian at that point had never really struggled with mental health stuff himself. So he didn't understand like on a true like level. But he still was there, and I feel like that is like true compassion to like see past like what even like your like I feel like empathy can kind of be a cloak for I'm a good person, you know, like because I can feel what you're going through, but it doesn't always. I feel like the true heroes are people who maybe don't necessarily naturally feel empathy, but are compassionate and kind anyways. And I'm not saying Ian doesn't feel empathy, but I'm just saying he's a very strong person and that he showed up for me in a way that I don't know that I would have been able to show up for him. But so unsexy marriage advice, I feel like everybody says like, oh, marry your best friend, like, you know, kind of blah blah blah.
Honestly, I'm gonna call a little bull honky on that.
Really? Tell me why.
This is from a perspective of dating as I'm older, like an adult, which I genuinely do feel.
I'm sorry, what
was that? I don't even know what you just did with your mouth.
I was trying to ask you how long have we been recording?
An hour and a half.
Oh dear God.
I know, it's okay. I think this is a really good conversation, so I want to keep having it. But this is at least something I've experienced in my adulthood. At this point, marriage is a little more, I think, logistical.
Well, okay, this is what I'm saying is I feel like when I first started saying stuff like this to you, like I could tell that it kind of like
it's like kind of were not like, romantic, and it's like not
it's not
feeding that it's not satisfying that like overly emotional thing that I want to experience.
But like truly like the most effective way that I have learned to look at my marriage. This sounds so clinical. I don't mean it like this. Married people, you know what I'm talking about. You know that you can be clinical in one sentence, but in your heart you feel differently.
Yes.
But like I feel like one of the most important aspects of my marriage is the partnership element.
Yes.
And the friendship element. Those kind of go hand in hand to me. Of like, yes, we have the romantic aspect of our relationship, which is great, and I love that, and I love nurturing that, and I never want to lose that. But like the day-to-day life is unsexy. Like the day-to-day life is mundane, and so the part of your relationship that you're going to experience the most is the friendship part and the teamwork partnership part. Because you're a team. Like I love that you've been saying that a lot recently, because not that it's like, oh, one way is wrong and one way is right, but that just rings so true for me in my own relationship of just like, you are partners, like you are a team working through life together. And if you can view it as like, when one of us wins, we both win, and if one of us is losing, we're both losing, and we're helping each other no matter what. Like it's not about who gets the goal, it's not about you know, like who's winning, like we're both winning or we're both losing, and functioning as a team, what's going to be best for the team. And I love that. Like I think that is then the perfect foundation to then build
this like best friendship off of. But I don't think that I think the way that like being a best friend is painted in the culture is way different than that.
And like I would even go as far to say like I would call Ian my best friend, or like I would say like he's my best friend. Yeah. But like you're my best friend.
Yeah.
You're my best friend. And like I think it took us becoming friends for me to realize that it's like okay for us to have a type of relationship that is filling a need that I'm not getting in Ian.
Yes.
Not that he's not enough or that he's not supplying, but I think I used to spoiler alert, I used to lean on him for pretty much everything, and it almost killed our marriage. That's what when marriage got hard.
Yeah.
But like he doesn't have to be my girlfriend sitting on the couch giggling, like doing all these things. Like, and I kind of, not that I expected him to be exactly that.
Sure.
But I expected him to fill all relational needs in my life.
Yes.
And there are needs that you fill that he doesn't have to fill.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. And so it's like, he doesn't have to be like, oh my God, he's my best friend.
Right.
You know, like, and I don't, like, I'm not begrudging you saying that.
He is in a sense though, right?
Sure.
Like he is your best friend in the way that I will never be able to be, right?
Absolutely.
At least for me personally, when it put a lot of pressure on me when people are like, marry your best friend, because I'm like, well, to me, my best friend, the experience I have having a best friend looks like one type of way, and I didn't have the capacity to hold that truth of everyone can't be everything to me all the time, nor do they have to be. And like if I like this type of friendship that I have with someone else, like it's okay if that doesn't look exactly like what I would call my best friendship. I think you need to have a base of friendship in your relationship for sure, because like you said, that's where you kind of exist in like the day-to-day. But I think this thing where it's like you just are like these souls that collide in the beginning, and it's like great if that happens to you, and I'm maybe a little bit, you know, bitter that it didn't happen to me exactly that way. But I also like now I'm so excited for this life where it's like I get to build this like best friendship with somebody, because I have someone who's equally committed and like desires to be a team with me. And we have this culture in our relationship where it is this theme of like, we win together, we lose together, and like, let's try to have fun while we're doing both of those things, you know?
Right. And I feel like that idea is, for me at least, harder to hold on to because again, I struggle really hard with comparison, and I feel like the culture is so opposite of that. Like I said, like it's easy to look at relationships like that and to feel like, oh well, that's not sexy, like like it's not passionate enough, like it's not whatever. And like if that's really how people feel about each other, if they're just like stars colliding, like I'm just whatever, like that's great. But I feel like it's been so important for me. And again, this is not a dig at my own relationship. Like even now I feel insecure about talking about the reality of my relationship. Yeah. But like, I think redefining your metric of what success is in a relationship, like how often you're feeling these big feelings, I feel like is not a metric of success that I'm able to use, because like I don't think that's what it means for me. Like I don't think a successful relationship for me means that I'm in this emotional place all the time. Right. Like I love my relationship and I'm very happy in my relationship, but it may not look like how everybody else wants it to look in the movies or in pop culture, when it's like this is what it's like. But it's like, do I want to be obsessed with another person in this way? Do I want them to be obsessed with me in this way? Like to a degree, like do you want your spouse and you to like
be invested in each other?
Absolutely. Like and again, like I feel like I'm betraying myself by being honest about my relationship, but I don't feel like my relationship is lacking in that way. No. But it's just when you are looking at what other people are displaying, it's like, oh, well, we don't post like that about each other on Instagram, so do we somehow have a deficit?
Right. Yeah, it's just not true, because again, like that's the highlight reel of everyone else, or maybe what they just want to put off to the world. As you were saying, you're not always feeling these like huge feelings. I think even that is this slippery slope of now you are posturing yourself to think more about how is this relationship serving me and like my emotions, instead of how am I serving this person and our relationship as a whole. Because it's like, it's very self-motivated of like, well, you're not giving me what I need to produce this feeling, when like we know that feelings and emotions are fickle. And I think there's a difference between being aware and taking into account your emotions, because I do think they can be great signalers to deeper issues that are going on or other things. Like, we obviously have emotions to experience them, and they can increase the enjoyment of certain moments and such, but to solely use them as, you know, your true north of like, oh, well, yesterday he made me and that's also putting this like unrealistic responsibility on this other person to make you feel something. You know, it's like, oh, he made me feel this way yesterday by doing this, and now today he's not, so obviously our marriage is in danger.
You're traveling kind of on a spectrum.
Yeah.
And if you're expecting to always be in the same place,
right,
one, you're not growing, but also like that's unrealistic to
Yeah.
expect that a long-term relationship isn't going to change.
Yeah.
One of the best, it wasn't even advice, it was just a comment, but I was a live-in nanny before I got married, and the lady that was the mom of the family found out that I was engaged.
Yeah.
And she was kind of like, hello, like an example of a person who did have a relationship with me and a right to speak into my life was like, hey, what's up? Like, are you good? Like, what's the plan? Like, you know, like, she sat me down, we had coffee, and we talked about our life and marriage and what I wanted. And she shared with me about her marriage. And one of the things that she said, just kind of in passing, was like, well, my husband is more family to me than anybody else. She's like, my parents and my siblings, like, they're my family, but my husband is like my family.
Yeah.
And I had never heard anyone say that before. And honestly, since, like, I haven't heard anyone refer to their husband as like, oh, like, this is my family. Like, I've heard people talk about like, oh, like, our little family or whatever. Right. But like, the way that she said it is like, he's like my family. Like, he's more of my family than my mom is my family. Yeah. And I was like, what does that mean? Right. But like, I get that now. Yeah. And like, that is more important to me now than having butterflies constantly. Like, I had huge butterflies when we were dating and engaged. Like, I had all of those things. I had the wild roller coaster of emotions and all that stuff, and that did change. And I always was like, well, I'm not gonna change. Like, it's not gonna change for us, like, because we're just not right. Yeah. But like, it does change. Like, it does. I hate to even use the word go away, because it makes it just negative connotation. Right. But like, things do change over time. Yeah. But like, the deep level of like family that we have now, like, that we are each other's family. Yeah. Like, that is a new stage of a relationship that you just can't get to. Right. Overnight. And like, I think that part of the relationship is just so wildly undervalued. Yeah. Like, I think the exciting part at the beginning is really highly valued, but like, the years of work and team mentality and loving each other and forgiving each other, and you develop this bond of like, we've been through a lot together, and there's pain in that, but there's also a lot of joy in that. Like, I just think that is such a cool part of our relationship that I'm really enjoying and loving. Yeah. Because we have like, we haven't been married for a super long time, but I feel like I've around like the 6-year mark, I actually started feeling like, okay, like, we've been married for a second. Yeah, like, right. Up until 5 years ish, it was like, we made it to another anniversary, and I kind of feel like I was like proving the critics wrong. I'm like, see, look, like, we've been married for 2 years. Look, we've been married for 3 years. Like, I was so just like eager to prove that I was able to do it, and now I'm like, I've earned a couple stripes. Like, you know, like, maybe not a ton, but like, I've earned a couple stripes being here. Yeah, and like, we've just developed a closeness that like we didn't have 8 years ago. Yeah. Like, we didn't really know each other in the same way 8 years ago. Again, I'm not saying if you have a really difficult relationship or if things are really bad, like, I'm not trying to advocate of like, just wait it out and someday you'll feel great.
Right. No, that's a different
but
type of thing.
When you're living life with someone and committed to them and working through these things that come up, like, it really does pay off.
I don't even know if this is necessarily a product of time and age, or if it's just a product of doing the work, I guess. But something I do feel like that has shifted for me is that de-emphasizing how does the beginning feel to me, and like taking the idealization of how that story would play out and having a more realistic view of I am looking to build a future with somebody, and like just having a much more realistic idea of what that really entails, or like, and obviously like I don't know for sure, but I feel like the older I've gotten, the more I can recognize these are the things that really matter in terms of having a lifelong committed relationship with someone. And like, I don't want them to just make me feel good all the time if they're not reliable, and like, you know, and I don't want them to like give me the butterflies if they're not going to keep their word, or like I don't want this thing if they're not going to be able to provide and like have a good work ethic, and like all these things that are like kind of quote unquote boring and unsexy, or that you want in addition to the butterflies and stuff. But it's like, I mean,
that's when, flashback to the beginning, when Ian and I were first engaged, talking about getting married. And like I said, like I was prepared for marriage to be so hard. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time like sitting down and journaling and trying to specifically separate my feelings from Ian's character as a person. Yeah. Because I was like, I'm feeling all the feels. Like, I want to marry this man right now. Yeah. But like, is that a good idea? Right. And so I remember like sitting down and writing a list of like things that I thought about Ian. And it was like those exact things. It was like, he like is a hard worker. Like he's not gonna sit around and be unemployed. Like if he needs a job, he's gonna find a job. Yeah. He is going to stay no matter what. Yeah. Like I know that about my husband is that he can be a jagoff sometimes. But he's a committed jagoff. He's committed. Yeah. No, like seriously. More than I am. Like I'm not like trying to rag on him. Like he has a much easier time being like this is where we are, and how we feel doesn't matter. Yeah. Not saying like, oh, we're just committed to being miserable for the rest of our life. No, but we're like this is going to be a sweeping generalization, and I understand that and I acknowledge it. But I do feel like in general men are designed to have that ability to like just like weather a storm. Yes, I would say that's very true specifically of both of our two men. For sure. Absolutely. In the case of us two women and those two men, those things are very true. Yes. But yeah, like I knew that like even if things were hard, I knew that he was not going to leave. Yeah. And I knew that he was able to say sorry for things that he had done wrong. Yes. We've been through some major changes. Yeah. We've gone from being 19 and 21 to 26 and 29. Yeah. Like we've gone through a lot of just normal life changes, but it feels like a lot sometimes. And when we've felt not incompatible, but just when we've been changing in ways that feel unpredictable or difficult to deal with, like I can fall back on those characteristics that I know are true about him. Yeah. You know, like that are still true to this day, like who he is as a person. Yeah. And knowing that he was the right choice. And again, that doesn't sound very sexy to be like, regardless of how I feel, will he make money? Will he keep his word? Yeah. Like, will he be committed no matter what? Yeah. Like, that's what you build a life on, though. It would be great if you could have those things, and he's also really charismatic, and you know, and you get along all the time, no matter what. Yeah, right. But like, that's just not realistic. This idea of like accepting that two things can be true at the same time also has helped me frame my future in such a freeing way. My future is not always going to look like this clean cut magazine picture that I had pictured it was going to be. And like, that's okay. And also I'm kind of excited for the journey of these really turbulent times, and then these really like growing times, and these really fun, peaceful times, and these really chaotic. Like, I'm excited for it all. Like, maybe a little naively, you know, like it's like, oh, it's all gonna be good, even though it's bad. But like, I think you and I can both acknowledge that like you're always gonna be that way at the start of a relationship. I know. And but there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's the other thing, is I think people are willing to acknowledge, like, oh, you're gonna be so naive and hopeful at the beginning, but then it'll change.
Yeah, that'll die someday.
Like, it's important. Is marriage hard sometimes? Like, absolutely. But like, you know what's so great? Thinking about all the memories you have of all the wonderful, amazing times you had when you were deciding to spend the rest of your lives together. When you were so hopeful for the future.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes do you feel like, oh, I was a little naive? Sure. But like, those are good memories. Like, those are good things. Like, you need this. That's part of the house that you're building. Like, you want to get to the top floor, you're going to start somewhere. And you can start with the awesome, fuzzy, great, hopeful feelings. Like, I feel like we should celebrate all of it. Yeah. Celebrate the 8 years, the 10 years, the 20 years, when you're building something rich and deep and meaningful, but you build it off of the love and the attraction that you feel, and then you go through a conflict and you work through it, and you have the love and the attraction, and then you are a couple years together and you have these memories. Like, it's all part of it. And so it's like, it's great. It's great to be hopeful. It's great. Why would you get married if you weren't hopeful for the future that things were going to work out great? You should be hopeful that things are going to work out great. Like,
that's
sorry, I don't know why I got so worked up about that. I just think, like, I think it's hard to be a human living with another human. I think that it's hard to be self-aware, and like we were kind of touching on earlier, like, working through your issues with someone else watching you is incredibly hard. And not even just watching you, they are intrinsically tied to what you're doing, and the result of your soul searching is going to affect them directly. And that's part of what's hard about being married in your early 20s is it is hard to go through that process tied to somebody else. It's doable. I am living proof that it's doable, but it is hard. And what people were saying to me when I first got married, and what you have been saying for yourself, is this expectation of like, my spouse is going to fill these needs for me. And I really think that that's like such a marriage killer. Like, I think the best times in my marriage have been when I am getting like personally fulfilled by God. And I'm not saying like, well, I'm trying to keep our podcast kind of religiously neutral in some ways. Okay. Because I know a lot of people are listening who don't necessarily believe the same things as I believe. But I think that whether you're getting that from God, I would say that that's the best source. But like, I think that across the board, it's unhealthy when you are expecting your spouse or significant other to meet all your needs. And you don't have any self-reliance. Like, that's the position that I was in when our marriage hit its our hardest spot. Is I experienced some hurt from my husband, which happens in marriage. You're gonna hurt each other. And I was so unable to cope with that hurt because my entire identity was wrapped up in my husband and being married and being my husband's wife. Like, I just could not cope with this difficulty in our marriage because I felt like it took everything from me. Like, this thing that should have just been a problem that we fixed turned out to be this huge thing because it felt like it just stripped me of who I was supposed to be. And it took a lot of, you know, like, recovery and time to heal from that. But like, the healthiest times that have come after that are because like I've been able to have a healthy expectation of what my husband can do for me, which is like, in a relationship you should be, you know, you do want things from each other, but also like, he is not where I'm getting all of my confidence, all of my fulfillment, all of my encouragement, and like, I think in any relationship, if your goal in the relationship is to be served, I think that's gonna be a ticking time bomb on your relationship. Like, because in our specific case, like, the function of a relationship is to be a lifelong partnership. And I do think that's different from how like secular culture views it as like a way to pass time or a way to feel good for your life. And it's like, we kind of come from the perspective that it's a lifelong commitment for betterment and for service, which is, if you don't have that view, obviously this isn't super helpful, but I think that it's easier to stay married that way.
That just made me think about something you actually said to me that I feel like it put actual legs to this idea of not everyone can be everything to you all the time. You said, I know this is going to sound kind of cliche, but no one is ever going to see you as deeply or as fully as God will. After that, like, it just kind of clicked for me. No one, like, not even you.
What?
Nobody on earth will ever see to the depths of who I am. God really is the only one who is going to truly and fully know me. Like, it just opened up all of this freedom for me to, like, let people off the hook. Kind of, you know.
It's hard though. Yeah.
It is hard, but at the same time, I just feel like a lot of my relationships have gotten so much better because I'm not just like looking at them all the time like, how deeply do you know me? I'm not comparing every little answer to like, well, you know. And there's a difference between, you know, having intentionality in relationships, but like this expectation for someone to like see into your soul and like know 100% who you are is like just impossible. And
even if you do feel that way, like I can only imagine that someday that's going to break your heart when they don't do it the one time.
Yeah,
you know, like
exactly.
As close as you can get to someone, as much as you know someone, you're going to let them down eventually. And I feel like I may have said that. That's good for me. But I feel like that's something I'm relearning in my life right now, in a space where I'm feeling more insecure and more sad and wanting to just be fully loved and fully seen and really like tangibly experience that. I feel like God has been reminding me that like, your husband's great, but he's not me. You know, like your dad is great, but he's not me.
Right.
Like your best friend is great, but she's not me.
Yeah.
You know, like just reminding that like I'm doing that same thing of like, I'm looking around being like, well, who loves me? Like who's going to show me they love me? And as humans, we're just not capable of doing that for another person all the time, 100%.
Right. Yeah.
And I do think it's important to lean on God in those situations, because it does give other people room to be flawed humans, just like you are a flawed human.
It's like this insurance policy that I now kind of feel like I have on my heart, which is like, when you fail me, like it's okay because like God's covering it. Like, you know what I'm saying? And like, or when, and obviously that will probably change. Like it probably won't always be this strong or this secure. Well, at some point
I felt strong enough that I was able to articulate that to you.
Yeah,
and now
right.
in this moment, I'm feeling a little less secure. Like I think it comes
ebbs
and
it
goes.
Yeah,
because I think that as humans, we want to be loved and seen and known. And like when we're walking strong with God,
it's like
it's easier to feel confident. But you're not always going to be in that place 100% of the time. But it's why we have people to remind us.
Exactly. Community.
Anyway, that's the pod.
Wow. Well, we missed you last week, so.
Oh yeah, this can be a super reunion episode.
Super soup.
Exactly. I hope some of our thoughts made you think.
I know.
Made you laugh.
Over the teeth and
through the lips and lick out the stomach.
Here we go.
Anyway, y'all have a good week.
Have a good week.
Bye.